Cops are not your friends. Even if you're a fan of cops, you can probably admit that cops are not your friends. To do their job requires them to... Well, we'll get into that. Hello, ladies, men, and non-binary friends. Welcome back. Ooh, I've been wanting to make this video for a really long time, and I feel like with everything happening right now, people are finally willing to listen. With high-profile cases like the Karen Reed trial putting a spotlight on police corruption, and the negligence of police officers that led to the death of Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota state representative that was murdered by a white nationalist in her own home, we have seen on full display how ineffective our law enforcement is and how they use their power to protect themselves and inflict violence on us without consequence. But in case you don't believe me, I've gathered evidence to prove my own case that cops are not your friends. We are told growing up that if you're in trouble, you should call the cops. We're taught that police only bring in criminals. We're taught that in this country you are innocent until proven guilty. We're taught that you have what are called Miranda rights, and that the police are the ones who will read it to you upon your arrest. And police only use force and violence if absolutely necessary. And all of this is a lie. In this country, calling the police can actually lead to your arrest, even if you're innocent. Innocents are killed by police all the time. Police may not read you your rights or even give you a reason why you're being arrested. Police use excessive force and violence all the fucking time, sometimes for no reason at all, especially if you're a person of color, double especially if you're black. Now, my generation also grew up with 1,000 different shows of procedural crime dramas with the exact same formula, which looking back was definitely propaganda to build a favorable image of cops and federal law enforcement. Turns out it's a lot easier to justify the atrocities of our government when it's behind a quirky cast of characters. But more importantly, when characters use violence or step outside the bounds of the law, it's always for a good cause. It's to take down that rotten criminal that keeps skirting the system. Then once the villain is caught, the cop gets a slap on the wrist or some mild disciplinary action for breaking said laws. And this gives us the impression that when real police officers break the law, there has to be a good reason, right? No! The one lesson we are learning today is... But first, I'd like to thank Aura for sponsoring this video. I don't know about you, but I don't trust my government to protect my personal information online. Last year, major companies across the country had data breaches with millions of customers' personal information released online. I'm sure you're all aware of the national public data breach that led to pretty much every American social security number being posted online, which is terrifying. My credit card was actually hacked during this breach, and I was literally looking for some kind of software to protect myself and my information online. Or reached out and I tried their product, and they had way more features than I was expecting. I'm so used to the shit I pay for doing the bare fucking minimum, or making me pay for like specific add-ons after I've already purchased. But trust me when I say Aura has literally everything that you will need to protect your personal information online. They have your real-time credit score, and they can freeze your credit so no one can open credit cards in your name without you knowing. They can even see if your emails or passwords have been leaked on the dark web. They have real-time alerts if your data has been compromised, including your bank accounts, or scan my entire computer of hundreds of thousands of files for any sort of viruses or malware. And now, for anything that I download, they will auto-scan it to keep any viruses and malware off my computer. They'll also contact data brokers for you to stop them from selling your information. And of course, there's a lot more, but I'll let you find that out for yourself. Go to aura.com/happypancake to try Aura for 2 weeks for free. And that will be plenty of time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data has been exposed online. So stop leaving yourself open to data breaches. Click the link in my description for a 14-day free trial. Thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you for giving it a try. If you'd like to help my channel and help me continue what I do here, the best thing that you can do is check them out. I'm incredibly grateful to Aura. They have been my biggest supporters in this, so give them some love. So what is happening right now? ICE is flagrantly violating the law in an effort to deport as many people as possible, all while almost completely depleting their budget for the entire year in the first 6 months of 2025. It doesn't matter if you've been a model worker drone. It doesn't matter if you have asylum protections. It doesn't matter if you're going through the proper channels and trying to attain citizenship legally, which is apparently all the conservatives wanted, but we knew that that was a lie, right? In fact, it seems that they are purposefully targeting people that are following the rules. If you want more information about ICE, check out this video of mine right here. And in a not so shocking turn of events, the police are not protecting and serving the people. They're not enforcing the law or apprehending ICE agents for breaking that law. They're not even protecting the citizens and legal residents that are being wrongfully detained by ICE. So what are they doing?
PD remains focused on its core mission to protect lives, safeguard constitutional rights, and serve every neighborhood in Los Angeles with integrity. Let me open it up now for any questions you might have or any points that we can clarify.
They shot my boy from point blank. This is what happens when you come out and try to peacefully protest. That kid that they shot, no weapons. He got hit once, turned around, hit him again. So they're not shooting you to try to get you to go away. They're shooting you to hurt you.
They're saying nobody leaves. It's not the 8 o'clock curfew. They've tracked us in here. They've surrounded us all in here. They said we're under arrest.
We've got trigger happy fucking bitch over here. Look at, they're telling her to move, but that's a public sidewalk. Watch, if they shoot her. Come here. Sit down. Where'd he get you? Really, fuck off. She's not doing anything. Come on. We're moving, assholes. They're gonna shoot. We're moving. Stop.
The LAPD, the paragon of morality in our country, is partnering with ICE for the most lethal collab on the internet right now, shooting civilians and press with rubber bullets and tear gas for protesting and pushing back against the local Gestapo. Sorry. ICE. Nevertheless, the LAPD are escalating violence during these protests and attempting to put the protesters in a poor light. But fortunately, most of us have eyes and camera phones and are able to capture their intentional warping of the narrative on video.
I'm not going anywhere. What's your badge number? That's okay. I'm gonna pop you right now because you're taking up my focus.
We haven't done anything. Who are you hitting, bro? Chill. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? What the fuck? What the fuck? Yeah, chill. He's already been hit.
In case you needed a reminder, lawyers, judges, actual experts on the law have asserted that what ICE is doing is illegal, in addition to it being completely inhumane. And all these civilians are doing is exercising their First Amendment right to protest. So why are they the ones being violently pursued? I'll give you a hint, dear viewer. Cops are not your friends. Now, this isn't new for people protesting conservative policies, though. Cops escalate violence at left-wing and leftist protests all the fucking time. We saw it in the Black Lives Matter protests years ago, pro-Palestine protests, pro-trans protests. These are examples of causes that have overwhelmingly peaceful protests that are then escalated by police and then demonize those protests and make the protesters look like the agitators. The recent ICE protests in LA, for example, have been labeled as riots and insurrections. Mainstream is showing cars on fire, but when you see the live footage of the protests, specifically from the point of view of the actual people who are protesting and not highlight clips that are on Fox News, 99.9% of it is just people congregating, chanting in protest, marching together, people are singing. In fact, the only damage that I've seen is property damage of a few Waymos, which did not have riders in them. They're self-driving cars with no riders. And these Waymos have also been stealing jobs from Uber drivers and cab drivers and were brought to California without any input from these citizens. So the only damage that has happened is not violence, it's property damage. Meanwhile, neo-Nazi protests, anti-trans protests can carry on unbothered by police and often need to be reported on by the average citizen who need to put their own protections in place because the police don't see these bigots as a threat, despite their entire ideology being based on hatred, violence, and the death of minority groups. Which brings me to my next point. Cops don't actually protect us. At least, not in the capacity that they are propagandized to. There is no statistically significant evidence that an increased police force leads to a significant decrease in crime. In reality, about 11% of all serious crimes result in an arrest, and about 2% ends in a conviction. The number of people police hold accountable for crimes, what I call the quote, criminal accountability rate is very low. Remember, cops aren't really that smart, and I'm not saying that to be mean, but it's true. For most police departments, you don't need above a high school diploma or GED to become a cop. These are not our best and brightest trying to solve these violent crimes. Their greatest weapons are actual military-grade weapons. Even when police are at a scene where an armed presence is needed, sometimes they'll be too concerned with saving their own skins to do anything. Or those in need of protection are not made a priority by police until it's much too late. Or they pursue people that are genuinely trying to make their communities a better place.
All right, John, we've served 6 people. You ready to get your ticket?
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay, John, you're going to be cited for violating the food service food ordinance. Officer Wren is going to issue the citation.
Hi, my name is John. I'm a volunteer with Food Not Bombs. This is our 82nd ticket we've received for feeding the homeless and serving people that are hungry.
Is this really where our tax dollars should be spent? These bloated budgets that turn barely high school educated people against their fellow residents? Is this the crackdown on crime that police should really be focusing on? And if they're not protecting the rights of their fellow Americans and they're not protecting those who can't protect themselves, who exactly are they protecting? Well, despite the vast majority of cops being working class themselves, their services will almost always side with the state, the wealthy, and or the ruling class. We can't forget about Luigi Mangione. Luigi Mangione has been accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, and unless you were in a coma during this time, you couldn't get away from this story. Despite massive pushback in mainstream media, the vast majority of the public were in support of the alleged, quote, adjuster who killed Brian Thompson, the healthcare CEO responsible for the death of thousands for the sake of profit. I talk about this more in this video here. But the reason why I bring this up is because state and federal law enforcement were pulling out all the stops for the murder of this one CEO. They had the FBI in on this, local police, state police, and the actual person to call in a suspect wasn't even a police officer. It was a McDonald's worker who didn't even get a reward because she called the wrong tip line. Ugh. Luigi Mangione is innocent until proven guilty, but law enforcement are treating him like he's already guilty and a danger to our society because of the intense reaction to Brian Thompson's death from the public and because, quote, the adjuster is a direct threat to the most powerful people in this country, with any public support of the adjuster being vilified and demonized by mainstream media and those in power. Shortly after Brian Thompson was shot, Breonna Boston, mother of 3, was denied a claim via Blue Cross Blue Shield and said to the insurance rep over the phone, quote, you people are next. The police were at her door arresting her. She was charged with, quote, written threat to kill or injure, conduct a mass shooting, or an act of terrorism, which is a second-degree felony. As of late February, the charges were dropped, thankfully. But this was also after she was arrested, detained, and had to post $100,000 bail. Now remember, this is the cops' reaction to a mother of 3 who does not have a gun or access to firearms, saying something out of anger to a faceless corporation. So the police must take genuine threats of violence extremely seriously, right? No, because, say it with me now, cops are not your friends. Why don't we see this kind of action for school shooters who have murdered children, or people that have mounting evidence of domestic violence against their partner, or local residents trapped in natural disaster zones, or people who have been sexually assaulted? Cops have received criticism for their inadequate response to these crimes, particularly when the victims are Black, brown, and queer individuals. But whenever there's a millionaire involved, it's top priority. It is handled with the utmost care and seriousness. Again, they pull out all the stops for those with the most protection, the most resources, and the most power. Now, we really need to talk about Rodney Hinton Jr. I haven't seen any coverage of him since this story first came out, and the public response was interesting, to say the least. Now, Rodney Hinton Jr. fatally struck an officer with his car after his 18-year-old son Ryan was killed in a police shooting. Swaths of cops showing up at Rodney Hinton Jr.'s arraignment as a show of solidarity, I guess, for the deputy. I guess they've completely forgotten that a child is dead. because of them. Funny how Rodney and Luigi were both denied bond, yet there are plenty of shooters that killed multiple people who were not denied bond. Same for the white nationalist Kyle Rittenhouse, who killed 2 protesters and injured another, but not the guy accused of killing one greedy, disgusting CEO, and not the guy that allegedly had a psychotic break after his son was murdered and killed a police officer. You'd think that killing more people would lead to a steeper sentence, but I guess not. It's weird. It's almost like our judicial system cares more about certain people. It's just interesting to me. Now, the public was mostly on board with this. After all, the police murder innocent black people all the time with almost no consequences. The tune changed, however, when they found out that the officer Rodney hit was not the same officer that killed his son. Now, let's just break this down for a second, because frankly, there are no police officers that are completely innocent, right? Even if they aren't the ones that are participating in the corruption or dishonorable activities, they are covering for the cops who are. We've even seen good cops who have spoken out against the corruption within their departments face swift punishment and even firing for doing so. As an online creator, I can't condone violence, but if you are flagrantly killing a group of people without facing any sort of consequences or repercussions for doing so, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen? What do you think is gonna happen? People are gonna fucking snap. And while I think the public would have been more supportive if Rodney Hinton Jr. fatally struck the person who actually killed his son, I don't think it would have had the effect on this police department that the other officer's death had. Think about it this way. I'd be willing to bet that this was a lot more effective at holding these cops accountable, because if one of you fucks up, you're all at risk of violence being enacted upon you. Again, not condoning violence or murder, but that's the reality of the situation. This is just a simple cause and effect, mama. The Police Union of Cincinnati pressured GoFundMe to take down the fundraiser for Rodney's legal fees because he was, quote, an individual charged with violent crimes. Which is rich coming from them after they murdered a child.
Girl, MissHypocrisy.com.
The motto, protect and serve, is a motto that has been adopted by most police forces in America. But who are they protecting and serving? It's not the average American. It's the ruling class and the state. They will do whatever they can to maintain the status quo, even if that means enacting violence onto the average American. On to my next point. Cops aren't held accountable. Now, if all of the stuff I hadn't said already wasn't bad enough, because of their unique positioning in the judicial system, cops can get away with some of the most heinous crimes with little to no consequences, including murder, assault, domestic violence, sexual violence, and more. And most of us are familiar with the amount of excessive violence used by police, which pro-cop Americans will justify. And we will have disagreements about that, of course. But one thing I hope they would never try to justify is sexual violence by police. So we're going to get into that really quickly. Trigger warning. One study found that over a 10-year period, a police officer was caught committing sexual abuse or sexualized misconduct at least every 5 days. Another found that sexual violence was the second most reported form of police misconduct after excessive force. The most targeted by police for sexual violence are from historically marginalized backgrounds, including women of color, LGBTQ+ people, workers, and people vulnerable to threats of incarceration. For example, the ACLU and the ACLU of Montana recently filed an amicus brief support LB, a Northern Cheyenne woman who was by an on-duty federal law enforcement officer after calling for help. The officer coerced LB to perform sexual acts by threatening to arrest her and have social services remove her children. You believe me now? Just so you know, some of these are very disturbing and also involve children, so just be aware of that as we move forward. There was an ex-police chief that was sentenced for paying $100 to R-word a teenager. This was, of course, after the judge had delayed his sentencing 12 times.
A police chief in West Virginia paid $100 to essay a 17-year-old girl. And though it has been 2 years since he was found guilty, he still hasn't been sentenced yet. Police Chief Larry Clay Jr. of West Virginia paid $100 to a girl's stepmother in order to essay her while on duty and in uniform. The first time was against his patrol car, the second in an old police office. The stepmother has been sentenced to 9 years in prison and has said that she did this because they needed the money to pay bills. Clay, however, hasn't been sentenced. After his arrest, he begged his lieutenant to help him, saying, "I've seen other officers do stuff and it gets fixed." Clay even offered to resign from the sheriff's department as long as he could keep his certification so he could go work for a different law enforcement agency. Clay even tried trafficking the 17-year-old girl to a different officer, who ended up saying no, and then is now in prison for raping a 16-year-old in a different town. For the last 18 months, Clay has repeatedly requested to delay his sentencing hearing, and the judge keeps on agreeing.
Another police chief in Houston R-worded a girl 100 times. Yeah, this started when she was 9 years old. This is a literal police captain from Houston, Texas. Darren Edwards, 59, faces 3 charges, including sexual performance of a child, aggravated assault, and possession of child P-word. He's a 32-year-old veteran of HPD and served as the captain of the auto theft division. Last month, HPD said on social media that Edwards has been relieved of duty pending the outcome of an internal investigation. So he hasn't been fired. There's enough evidence to have him arrested, and they're like, actually, let's give him a chance. Go fuck yourself, dude. A former Rochester police officer pled guilty to R-wording a 13-year-old girl and was sentenced to, get this, 10 weekends in jail. Like it's a little retreat. 10 weekends. 20 days total in jail. This is, of course, after he exposed himself to a 16-year-old online, while he was still working as a cop, of course. He was suspended for that, but allowed to come back to work after his case was waived by a grand jury. So this was his second charge for this type of crime. And much worse, I would say. This is an ultimate tragedy because these parents trusted him. He's a police officer, and if we can't trust the police, then who can we trust? It's a very difficult situation. This was a child who trusted somebody, and he was an adult who knew better. 10 weekends. I had to spend more time volunteering for my honor society in high school. We're talking about traumatizing a child. Go fuck yourself, dude. I hope you have diarrhea every day for the rest of your fucking life. This is just a friendly reminder that the threat to your children is not trans people or drag queens. It's your local fucking police department. Speaking of trans people, a trans person called the police because she was being trafficked. And the LAPD fucking shot and killed her. Best and brightest, gang. America's best and brightest. This is not merely a problem of, quote, bad apples. It's a problem enabled by power imbalances between officers and community members and a patriarchal culture of secrecy and silence. It commonly arises in police departments where leadership and local authorities ignore and tolerate patterns of abuse. One of us, for example, recently represented a black man with a substance use disorder who was beaten and repeatedly punched in the groin by officers from the Bronx Narcotics Unit. There were 560 prior lawsuits against this unit, with over 150 for excessive force, including sexually abusive conduct like strip searches and handcuffing a naked pregnant woman to a bed. The officers involved had previously been defendants in at least 50 lawsuits alleging similar conduct. None appear to have faced consequences, and they're still on the job. We're going to run through these last ones real quick. There was a Missouri police officer who killed a mother and child by gunshot and will face no criminal charges for that. There was an innocent man that was killed in Glendale, Arizona. Again, no charge for that police officer. They were actually looking for a different man. They just killed a random guy who had nothing to do with the call that they had received. And again, that police officer will face no charges for that. But of course, if anyone else did this, their ass would be sat in a jail cell. Now, police officers are prosecuted for murder in less than 2% of fatal shootings. Less than 2%, which means 98% of the time when a police officer kills someone, they are not prosecuted in the US. They will face no criminal charges. This next case is fucking despicable. A Long Island cop was driving under the influence, crashed in the back of a car that had a 2-year-old in the back seat, fractured that 2-year-old's skull, and he was able to come back to work with no consequences. That day, the off-duty police officer drove his pickup truck 20 miles per hour over the speed limit while texting and rear-ended a compact vehicle driven by Kevin Kavoris. Kavoris' 2 young sons were passengers in his car. Kavoris was treated for a broken nose, and his 2-year-old son, Riordan, was placed in a medical coma to repair multiple skull fractures. 2 years on, Riordan still needs leg braces, cannot run or jump, and suffers from lasting neurological injuries. When the crash occurred, instead of calling 911, Mascarella, the officer, called his union delegate. At the scene, a detective said he wanted to administer a breathalyzer test, but the responding sergeant contacted a Suffolk County Police Benevolent Association delegate who drove Mascarella away before the test was given. And because they didn't take a breathalyzer test from him, they can't technically say that he was drunk driving, and therefore he doesn't have to deal with any sort of consequences for disabling this child. As far as I'm concerned, everybody in that fucking police union is responsible and should face consequences for this. It's unacceptable. I'm not digging very hard for these stories. They are endless. And that's not even touching on the amount of Black Americans that have been killed by police, basically because they feel like it. In fact, there were only 11 days in 2024 when police did not kill people in the US. In 2025, so far there's only been one day when the police did not kill someone. May 3rd, that's been the only day. We're almost halfway through the year, and there's been one day where the police haven't killed anyone. Tell me how that's fucking normal. 502 people have been killed since the start of 2025. That's almost 100 people a month killed by police. Again, these are not one-off circumstances. This is a pattern of corruption, abuse of power, and lack of accountability. If you don't hold police accountable for their crimes, this will only embolden other cops to do the same heinous shit because they know they can fucking get away with it. And any pro-cop American out there, you have given cops a courtesy that is completely unearned, because this idea of righteousness that has been peddled to you by billionaires and millionaires and the ruling class, who own the mainstream media and actively benefit from cops, by the way, is completely fabricated. It is fictional. It is a delusion. It doesn't matter that these cops are working class. They are essentially untouchable by law. They are class traitors, and they are a job where you can commit almost any crime and face minimal to no consequences. That is a fact. My distaste for cops jump-started once I actually learned Black history in America and the origins of modern-day policing. The origins of modern-day policing can be traced back to, quote, slave patrol. The earliest formal slave patrol was created in the Carolinas in the early 1700s with one mission: to establish a system of terror and squash slave uprisings with the capacity to pursue, apprehend, and return runaway slaves to their owners. Tactics included the use of excessive force to control and produce desired slave behavior. Slave patrols continued until the end of the Civil War and the passage of the 13th Amendment. Following the Civil War, during Reconstruction, slave patrols were replaced by militia-style groups who were empowered to control and deny access to equal rights to freed slaves. They relentlessly and systematically enforced Black codes, strict local and state laws that regulated and restricted access to labor, wages, voting rights, and general freedoms for formerly enslaved people. By the 1900s, local municipalities began to establish police departments to enforce local laws in the East and Midwest, including Jim Crow laws. Local municipalities leaned on police to enforce and exert excessive brutality on African Americans who violated any Jim Crow law. Jim Crow laws continued through the end of the 1960s. The legacy and effects of biased policing are far-reaching. The U.S. is home to the world's largest prison population and highest per capita incarceration rate. As of May 2020, there were 655 incarcerated people per 100,000. Prison, parole, and probation operations cost U.S. taxpayers $81 billion a year. I would love for some of that to go towards the fucking potholes in my neighborhood. We all have something to benefit for police having less power. And again, their focus will almost always come back to protecting those that are already in power, rather than protecting the average American. Now, the kind of crime that is often prioritized by cops is often caused by poverty, lack of access to healthcare, inequality, socioeconomic disparities, etc. The root cause of which are not actually solved by police or what police do. The way to limit crime that police are so hell-bent on cracking down on is... drumroll. Social programs, healthcare for all, programs that help people find jobs, food assistance, housing assistance, and ensuring dignity and equal rights for everyone. When people have everything they need, they don't need to be stealing shit. They can get the help they need for their addiction. They can go to therapy instead of having a psychotic break and killing a bunch of people. They can be paid a living wage instead of working a job that pays better but is illegal and morally reprehensible. This is the future that we need to move towards. The United States has always been heavily militarized, and it has become increasingly so since Trump took office. We need to reframe this view that we have of our country. The issues that we're having are coming from lack of support from from the state. All the money in this country goes to billionaires, the military, and not military personnel or veterans, by the way. When I say military, I mean weapons for the military, and law enforcement. We need to pull way back. We have the most bloated military budget in the world, and yet most of us are struggling to survive. This has not made our country better. It's not working. We need a different plan. So what can we do? In the short term, you need to protect yourself from the police that are abusing their power, which means knowing your fucking rights. Know your fucking rights. Follow lawyers online. I will have some listed in the description below. I'm not a lawyer. Nothing I am saying here is legal advice. With this goddamn administration, shit is changing all the time. And you should be learning these changes from the people who, again, actually know the law. And it sucks that we all have to become experts in the law, but 'tis the best way to protect yourself. But when in doubt, if you are held by police, shut the fuck up. Ask for a lawyer, and then shut the fuck up. It's also a good idea to stay up to date on all of the shitty things that police are doing, especially if they're in your area. There's this woman, Rachel, who I follow on TikTok. I will put her in the description. She is fantastic. I will also include a site that maps police violence so you can see anything happening in your area that you can talk to your local representatives about. Make sure to follow community organizers and create a list for yourself. What tools would you need if a ICE/police raid came to your city or town tomorrow? And start getting that ready. For example, that could look like coolers full of water for hydration or washing out tear gas from people's eyes, first aid kits, goggles, respirators, masks, insulated gloves to throw back any projectiles that hit you. There's also a site called People Over Papers where you can actually track ICE raids that are sort of happening in your area. And again, as I always say, start building out those networks within your community. The police won't protect you, so you need to create communities where you can protect yourself. Another thing I wanted to add in was to learn about any crisis centers, community centers, and miscellaneous support centers in your area. These are the people you should be calling and supporting. See what they do, see what they stand for. Maybe you can volunteer or donate. And if you're in need, use these resources. Sometimes they're called mobile crisis response or mobile crisis intervention, and these are programs designed to handle mental health crises where a person is feeling suicidal or they're simply a danger to themselves or those around them. And these are handled by actual mental health professionals. A lot of these programs have been expanding over the past few years or have demanded expansion by their communities. It would be great to see more support for these programs, especially since there has been so much legislation put forth by Trump to make cuts to programs like these. Check to see if you have one in your area and ask them what they need for support. Now, long term, we're going to be looking at Now, that may not happen when Trump is in office, but there's absolutely no harm in starting the conversation now. Get people talking and keep them informed. There's no better time to stoke dissent than when the police are doing heinous shit like they're doing right now. Use it to your advantage when you're talking to normies about this. Rally for accountability when police do fucked up shit. Learn about any shady cop shit that's happening in your neighborhood, call your local reps about it, tell them that this shit will not fucking stand. This is about taking responsibilities and authority away from police on certain calls. And if we are keeping police in any capacity, it's a small team with limited weapons and authority like every other fucking developed country in the world. We should be giving mental health calls to mental health professionals, not cops with guns who don't have any training or education in psychology or mental health, and pulling billions of dollars that go to tear gas, tactical equipment, and guns that are used on our citizens to something more beneficial to our community like school lunches for kids, housing assistance, disability services, infrastructure, healthcare, income support. I'd love to hear any other suggestions that you have, but I feel like that's a good place to start. If this is something that you're unlearning for the first time, just know that that's okay if you're having to confront all of these things that seem like the opposite of what you've been told your entire life. This is part of unlearning what the US has kind of drilled into you from birth. It would be great if there was some benevolent force that was looking out for us and making sure that all of the worst criminals were put away with the swift hand of justice. Unfortunately, that is not the reality in the US. This is a group of people who have had unchecked power for a very long time and seemingly endless funds, specifically to keep the most marginalized people in our country down. And there can be a different way, but it has to start with unpacking the propaganda that we've been fed since we were children and unlearning all of the shit that has been shoved down our throats our entire lives. But we can do it, and you can do it. As always, I have her one's GoFundMe linked below. She was supposed to attend university this year, but Israel bombed her home and her school out of existence. If you don't have money to donate, that's totally fine. Make sure to leave a like and a comment for the algorithm, because there's got to be someone on this godforsaken app that can give $1 or $2. Westerly Academy Season 2 is starting up again soon, I promise. I've just had some crazy shit going on in my life. If you would like to help me, if you would like to support me, feel free to join my Patreon so I can get my shit on track. But don't worry, Westerly Academy Season 2 is coming out very soon, and I'm very, very excited. I've been chatting with my players, and it's going to be a great story. Make sure to check out our sponsor Aura in the description and go to aura.com/happypancake for a 14-day free trial. As always, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Bye. Very special thank you to Inside Chaos, Long Leg, Anonymous, Tiny Axes, and Robin Fellows.